To set the context for the screening, the catalyst for this event and what brought me and Suraj together for the screening is a diary that is held within the archives of Scarborough Museums Trust, a sporting trip through India by Colonel James J. Harrison from 1892. It tells the travels of Harrison, who was a game hunter, author, and seemingly perpetual traveller who settled in Bradensburton Hall near Hull, which was filled with macabre trophies of his annual hunts to Central Africa, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Asia. His privilege allowed him to travel and live in such a way, and there was very much a vogue during his lifetime for such ways of living, thinking, and exploitation. He's a controversial figure and acknowledged for his now outdated attitude and needs to be discussed within post-colonial dialogues so that the whole story can be told. In her study, Decolonializing Methodologies, Maori scholar Linda Tuawe Smith argues that colonialism is not a, quote, finished business, meaning therefore that there is a need to explore complex global histories and engage with the needs, demands, and desires that have arisen from these deeply troubled and appropriative historic relationships, such as those raised by Harrison and his diaries and actions. In Harrison's A Sporting Trip Through India, he recounts his personal travels in the country and interacting with local communities, such as one encounter with a, quote, very good English-speaking servant, rejoicing some long name I could never fathom, so I told him I should rechristen him James, end quote. Such appropriations of culture, changing this young Indian man's name, acts almost as a metaphor for the lack of desire travellers such as Harrison often had in getting to know a place, and instead intended to very much experience it still on their own terms. One of the many aspects of Harrison's travels in India involved hunting, and this is documented very thoroughly through photographs and taxidermied animals, which he brought back to the UK with him. A vast amount of local knowledge and human bodies were used in order to support Harrison in his hunts, locating the animals, scouting them out so it would be easier for him to catch. From the photographs, you can see the evidence of hunts, and from his writings, there seems to be little evidence of a consideration of the species that he was killing in relation to their importance or value to local populations, which may have been very different to Harrison's own view of them as, quote, a trophy and killing them for a fine sport. Photographs of his travels need to be studied and reanalyzed and questions asked to democratize them as a resource. But as mentioned, this is a process that is and can never be finished. So let's take a look at this picture of a tiger hunt. This is after a particular incident in an undisclosed location outside Chunar in northeast India, likely to be what is now the Chandra Prada Wildlife Sanctuary. The diary entry for this photograph discloses, quote, around 200 odd beaters with drums, horns, whistles and shouts, trying to get the tigers to leave its hiding place in the forest, trying keenly as they would get double the pay when a tiger is killed. After some time, the tiger is killed by Harrison, to which he explains, quote, of course, I took several photographs to remind me of this most picturesque spot, end quote. Photos, like archive film, act as a snapshot, a frozen memory of a time, action, or event. Here, this image is and was contextualized within the context of Harrison's diary and was taken to signal the successful killing of the tiger in India and the scale and amount of people that was involved in the hunt. But although it is Harrison's voice which has narrated and framed the photograph, it is about opening up the image, thinking about the other people within the group. What are their stories? What was their relationship to the environment and these foreign visitors? Why are they dressed in particular outfits? Although some of these questions are harder to find, it is about researching and building a rich context to allow us almost to recontextualize such images within wider historiographies. Now I'll hand over to Suraj to introduce the films and context for viewing them.
Thanks, Martha, for that beautiful introduction to the whole concept and why we are in this together. While reading through Harrison's diary, I was really intrigued by the description of the English speaking servant who was eager to please. That's how he's described. Now, this description led me to a very personal inquiry about myself. And several other members in the photographs of Harrison reminded me of the people I have come across throughout my life. The thought that these members would ransack their own forests to draw out animals, often revered in our cultures, to be hunted in this instance. And in other words, to mine our own natural resources and dismantle ecosystems in order to serve the master is very disturbing to begin with. I understand now that the notion of value attached with death and the extraction of it becomes very clear. And the colonialist attitude that sometimes makes me value things on the basis of whether I can carry them with me, uproot, overwrite, or extract it from where it has been for centuries becomes visible in some of the early images that I have shot myself. A snapshot of which will be presented today. How and why and when did I become a colonialist? Was it my education? Was it the influence? These questions led me to, and lead me and Martha to discuss more about what we are dealing with here. And the films in today's program are likely to draw out some of these influences and contrast with those that managed to somehow escape the tyranny of the colonial gaze. I hope that the selection will present an opportunity for you to initiate an inquiry about how you look at the world, how you attempt to capture it. The wonderful filmmakers in the attendance will also be able to help shed some light in their own journeys and offer some useful tips. I've also prepared a handy toolkit for you to begin your journey into decolonizing the images you see. And if you can go to the next slide, Martha. As you can see that your role, if you were to become a filmmaker, is that of a catalyst. You will see things through your distillation, you will prepare a concoction for your audience to consume. It's very important to remember this relationship. And can we go to the next slide, please? Now, this is your audience. And I would also like you to now make a brief note of the tools that I'm going to give you so that you can remember it when you're watching the films. But just for a second, try to imagine who your consumer is, who your audience is. Your consumers are often going to be people from your own culture, country, or linguistic association, for whom it may still be very difficult to travel and spend so much time and energy engaging with people of other cultures to satisfy their curiosities and hear great stories. Sometimes your consumers will take greater action than simply buying your ticket and may begin to respond in other ways to images that you show them. It could be charity, it could be many other things. It is important, therefore, that you present before them the best image that you can. With that premise, let's look at the tools that we have of looking at and sort of filtering the images that we are seeing very easily. This is, of course, a first hand manual sort of a thing, and it should always be, how you say in the medical terminology, correlated with more evidences, more artifacts that you have, and some expert opinion, of course. So in this handy toolkit, there are basic concepts that you can carry. And this slide basically just lists them. In the next slides, we'll try and look at how to identify these elements from the images that you're looking. Can we go to the next slide? As you can see in these images, the one on the left is a still from Louis Malle's film, Phantom India, that he shot in the year 1968. And the one on your right is the image shot by James Harrison during his travels to India. In both of these images, it's characteristic to understand that the subject is at a significant distance from the filmmaker. And this distance may not just be physically, this may be an emotional distance, like it is visible in the second image, where even though Harrison is standing with the same group of people who helped him into his hunt and his sport, he's still emotionally not with the same people. So it's as if they exist on two different domains, but they're just present in the same frame. And in the first frame, of course, you see that there is always this distance from which this child looks at the camera out of curiosity, out of fear, perhaps. We are going to make sure that we use these tools as we embark into creating a new sort of visual culture. Can you go to the next slide, please? The other characteristic of a colonial image will be the idea of movement or action. And the subjects in this, often the images, will capture these individuals in just one position. It will give you the impression that their entire day is just being in that position, and that's all that they're capable of. It is not interested in knowing anything more about the lives of its subjects. This is also because the colonialist filmmaker is a tourist. It wants to cover a lot of distance in little time. It doesn't have time to stay or look back. So a barber, like in the left-hand image, will always be a barber sitting at the ghats in Varanasi. And similarly, the woman on the right will always be the woman who prepares garlands of flowers for worshippers. The next slide, please. As an extension of identifying its individuals simply by their position or their movement, the colonialist filmmaker, and also because he is in this rush of traveling from one place to other, the colonialist filmmaker forgets to even request permission before shooting. It derives its power from the vocabulary of war. Shooting, capture, exposure, flash. These are the words that it uses with its devices that look very similar to those used in war. The image on the left is from Phantom India, a television series that Louis Malle made in the year 1968, a series that was never shown in India but broadcast across Europe via BBC and other channels. You will see a selection of this particular program, about 7 minutes of the section, which is about the Toda tribe from Nilgiris. This will be contrasted with a section from a film called The Vanishing Tribe, which was made by Paul Zils, which is also about the same tribe, shot almost a decade before Louis Malle. I would request you to notice the difference between the two filmmakers' approach to film the same subject. While Louis Malle is highly regarded as a filmmaker across the world, in this image on the left, he displays all the symptoms of being a colonialist filmmaker. Since I can understand the local language and the audio in the film has not been wiped properly, I know that the woman is angry and threatening to attack with the grass cutting tool in her hands. However, Louis feels more empowered because of his position as a filmmaker. Comparing these two photographs of individuals from Harrison's journal, I noticed that he simply looks at the people through their action. A car driver is simply that. When we move further from here, we understand that because of being in the move, the colonialist filmmaker tries to be smart and cover for its inability to converse with the subjects in their language. And the way to be that, to present that smartness is through interpreting and not conversing. If we can go to the next slide. So, because the filmmaker does not have the time or the ability to converse, the interpretation also means that the colonialist has no clue about its own culture. For instance, Louis Malle devotes about 10 minutes in his television series to this scene of a dead buffalo surrounded by vultures, which will be slowly shredded by these birds of prey. While the filmmaker is fixated on the visuals and interprets this as a tragedy, a drama in several acts, and while the Indian assistant responds that it is an everyday scene, a glimpse of life and death and its calm interplay, the two never have a conversation. At no point in the near 10 minutes of this violent and graphic scene does the filmmaker even speculate why there are no vultures in France, his home country. A question that can easily be answered today with a simple Google search, but was only an enigma for most people of his age. With these simple concepts or tools in your toolkit, you can begin to pry open the images you see and look beneath the surface. Look for what it reveals to you and look for how you want to engage with it. I hope you've made a note of these tools. The films we present now will help you in exercising your newly acquired ability to decolonize the image to a great degree. I'll also quickly introduce the films that we're going to see. First of all, we have Gautam Valluri's Midnight Orange. And this was filmed in the tombs of Pega family in Hyderabad, India. Noise, silence, and flicker and stillness tell us the tale of a tradition of architecturally outdoing our ancestors, even in death's eternal sleep. Gautam would be here with us, and he would be answering some questions if you have directly about the way, the process of his filmmaking. This will be followed by an extract from a film called Survey Number Zero. This is by Priya Thuvasari. She's an ethnographic filmmaker, and this film covers the story of salt workers in the plains of Gujarat. Salt is said to be one of the chief commodities which brought the colonialists to India. Priya's film accentuates the textures seen on the plains, salt plains, and thereby grants every grain of salt an ounce of well-deserved dignity. This will be followed by an extract of the film that I made about 8 years ago, the Dhenuki Cinema Project. This was the first experience of organizing a cinema project in my own village, where I had returned after 2 decades. This project was, in a sense, an attempt to reconnect with my own people. After many years, when I look back at the film, there are sections where I can see the colonialist in me peeking through it. This will be followed by an extract from Paul Zils's The Vanishing Tribe, and this will be contrasted or compared with Louis Malle's Toda People, which was shot in 1968. And this will all be followed by, or the end of the program will be by Tarini Manchanda's film, A Damn Old Story. Tarini's film sort of complicates the position of the viewer by engaging with its subject at great length, somehow becoming a reference manual for dealing with places, people, and subjects that a filmmaker may encounter. It also brings to fore a discussion about the various creative decisions that a filmmaker has to struggle with while attempting to decolonize or to try to present a narrative in a different way. So this is the program that we have for you today, and afterwards we'll be available for a question and answer session. I hope you enjoy the films.